Hello and welcome to BookTrib After Dark. We are so delighted to have New York Times best-selling author Heather Graham with us this evening, and I can see by the amount of questions already coming into the queue that her fans are too. As you know, Heather is the author of Crimson Twilight, the second novella in the 1001,000 Nights series, as well as part of her Krewe of Hunters series. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everyone to log on to BookTrib at the end of the chat to enter to win a mystery bag of Heather's favorite things. In addition to receiving this mystery bag, you will also be reminded of exciting live chats like the one you're going to see tonight, interesting book giveaways, and wonderful articles written by our sensational editorial team. Heather, as you know, is the author of some great novels such as Phantom Evil and The Killing Edge, and on March 25th, the long-awaited Waking the Dead will be published.
Carol, I'm good. Thank you.
And
Thank
now,
you very much.
it is my pleasure to introduce the one and only Heather Graham. Hello, Heather. How are you this evening?
Very much.
Heather, I wonder if your fans know that you began your career working in dinner theater and singing backup vocals. Having been in theater myself, I know that there sometimes is more drama backstage than on stage.
Of the whole experience.
Did any of the backstage antics find their way into your
stories? Especially, I worked a lot of dinner theater, and one of the shows, everybody was supposed to throw rolls at the villain. The show was called The Perils of Pornelli. And at the time, I was Pornelli. But it was a dinner theater where they were serving a great deal of alcohol. So by the end of the evening, you were wearing rolls and a lot of other things. It was such a great experience. I loved what I did, and a lot of my people are in theater, or they're my characters are musicians. It's definitely come in quite frequently. A lot of my definitely come in quite frequently.
I love it. It's an exciting life. I can understand why you would want to bring those characters alive in your books. But I know that your fans, of which there are many, who have been lining up to ask these questions, are hoping that you will have time to answer them tonight. And I have a few with me right now. Lena asks, what made you want to be involved in 1001 Dark Nights? And are you a fan of any of the authors within the series?
To read, which is why I began writing. And the series was put together by two friends of mine, Liz Berry and MJ Rose. And I loved the whole concept. I just thought what they came up with was brilliant. I liked the idea of taking some of my Krewe of Hunter characters and putting them into, a new situation where they could kind of go a little bit farther. And I really had tremendous faith in MJ and Liz. And I love the idea that we were, we were doing fresh new things, but they could also relate to what we were already doing. Doing fresh.
Chris has a very interesting question for you. How did you come up with the characters' names? Sloan, Trent,
especially,
and Jane Everett aren't very common names. What influenced you?
There are actually two of the names. Jane, my sister was Victoria Jane, so Jane is from her. And I also, one of her sister-in-law's name is Sloan. It's a family name, so a lot of people in her in-laws' family have the name Sloan, and so that's where that one came from. Everett, I think, came because I was looking at a sign that had something Everett on it. And Trent, I suppose, just came at the time. Everett, I think, came because I was looking at a sign. Names are hard, though. Trent, I suppose, just came at the time.
Our next question comes from Hula Monkey. What are the most important attributes to remaining sane as an author, if there are any?
As far as every day goes, I would say the most important thing to remember is discipline, because you have to sit down and write every day if that's what you want to do, if it's going to be your chosen career, and you just have to remember absolute discipline, and that you not that everybody thinks, oh my God, I'm going to have to give hours and hours of every day and every week, and I can't because I have children or I have another job. Discipline is taking whatever time you have and really sticking with it. So if you say you're going to work 5 hours a week, you've got to work 5 hours a week. Really sticking with it. 5 hours a week, yeah, 5 hours a week.
Lots of discipline. L. Martin. While you were
Yes,
writing
I
this
did,
book, were you drawn
because
to any of the characters in terms of a
a
sense of
lot of it
feeling
was
like you were
based
in their
on a wedding
shoes?
I actually went to, which came out quite differently. It was my son's wedding. He had it at a castle in actually up in Massachusetts that had been brought over piece by piece. It was an absolutely gorgeous, wonderful wedding, but the venue was so incredible that I just thought, wow, this is something that I've got to be able to use again. Not so much, I can't say a character, because I'm sure there's a little bit of us in every character. You know, the way that we think or feel or believe that someone would think or feel. That's going to be in the characters. But hopefully, yeah, no, we had we had a good wedding. Everybody came out alive.
I really like this next question. Comes from a very brave guy. He says, I'm a guy. This is from Dylan. Hi, Dylan. I'm a guy, but I really enjoyed this
I
book.
have an awful
Do you
lot
think
of
that
male
romance
readers,
books are more
honestly,
geared toward
because
women? Do
I
you get
belong
feedback
to
from men who
everything.
read
I
your
belong
books?
to horror writers. I belong to mystery writers, thriller writers, romance writers, and pretty much so wherever I go, I'm whatever you want me to be. So I'm very appreciative. I have a lot of men who read these books. So I'm very, I have a lot of, yeah, absolutely. I
Passion for
am,
fiction.
you know, define
Don't you love?
children.
You gotta love that
I have
name.
done
Would you ever write for children
one
instead
a
of
Christmas
adults?
book years ago, which will actually be out again this Christmas, based on a little boy who everything's going wrong in his life. He has an aunt who's trying to raise him because his parents have died, and he can't quite get things going with baseball, which is the one thing he has. And for Christmas, the ghost of Babe Ruth comes back to help him. So definitely plan for a younger audience. And then I also have something out called There Be Christmas Dragons, which is a fractured illustrated fairy tale, which was a great deal of fun to write. And that's definitely more or less for children or adults. I mean, it's a fairy tale, whoever feels like a fairy tale. And I'm also working on something right now, a NASA associated book with a friend, John Land, and it will be young adult. It was one of those experiences that was incredible. We have an editor at Tor who has taken a group of us on trips to the Goddard Space Center so that we can create fiction based in fact.
John Land and M.J. Rosa are some of our favorite authors, so it's great to all be in that same family. From No White Noise comes this question.
Probably.
If you had to
The
do it all over
problem
again,
with
would you
books
change
is
anything in your
you
latest
always
book?
see something
Interesting.
afterwards you would have done a little bit differently. But I don't usually, once something's in and I know that it's a done deal, that's how it's going out, I don't read it again until I have to flick through it, because I don't remember what a character looked like, and I'm going to use them again, or just to check facts. But I've, like most people over the years, I've made a few mistakes, maybe more than a few, but things that I would love to take back. But once it's gone, it's that's it. But that's it.
Tony asks,
Oh yeah,
have you
definitely.
always wanted to be a writer?
I
Or was there
really,
something else
we
that
had mentioned the
you were
theater
interested in
before.
doing before the writing
Best
bug
income I
grabbed you
made
and
for
you
theater
became so
was
successful?
children's theater, and then I worked for GTE services with a pointer, telling them, instructing people on the insides of a telephone. And that was actually an agented SAG job, and it was the highest money I ever made, and probably the most most boring of the events I was able to take part in. And then I also did a lot of commercial work, and one of them I always remember is the dog. My dog and I were both hired. It was for something called a trim twist, and the motto was "Everybody's doing it." And thankfully, it was my dog because the dog made more money than I did. So that was interesting. But I really did love. I loved stage. I always loved stage. And we still put on a stage show every year at the Romantic Times Convention, Fractured Dinner Theater, and then I do a convention in New Orleans every year. It's a benefit for the city, and we put on dinner theater there, which is really hysterical because we throw it together in, everybody has a matter of 3 hours to practice whatever we're doing. And we have a band. We have the Slush Pile Band, which is fun. So we it's kind of keeping my fingers in a little bit. Everybody has a matter of hours to practice what we're doing. We have a band. It's fun. So yeah. No, it's so fun.
I can understand that. It's easy to leave the
And I just
stage,
love
but
to
it's
watch
hard to
them,
wipe
too.
off that grease paint. It's just a very exciting thing to be involved in, live stage presentations. Now we have Stephanie, and she's asked a very Stephanie has asked a very Barbara Walters type
no
question.
idea. Oh, wow.
What animal best describes your overall personality?
I think most of us would like to think we're wolves or cats or something very cool. I really have no idea. Wow. But I will think about that for the future.
That'll be something we'll come back to in our next. Madison has a very interesting question. She says, you probably get a lot of generic questions. So instead, can you imagine your main character dies on page 1? Everything else remains the same. How would the plot
I actually
change?
wrote a book where one of the main characters was dead from the first page. In this particular one, how would it change? Sloan would have to be marrying her, not caring that death had already done them part. Or perhaps they would both have to be dead, but because they're Krewe of Hunters and their friends can all see them, they would be able to go through the wedding anyway and still solve the mystery of what happened to the priest.
Very good answer. Another one of your fans, Cheza, asks, is it true that you
don't
always write books about vampires?
I have written a vampire
Why do you
series.
think people are drawn
I've
to the
also written about
supernatural and
ghosts,
suspenseful?
And I've worked with friends on something called the Keepers, which are humans who look after various paranormal creatures in the world. I've worked on those with good friends, Harley Jane Kozak, Alex Sokoloff, and Kathy Pickering, Beth Seata, and Deb LeBlanc. We have had a tremendous fun doing those. But I've also written straight suspense. I have written a fair amount of horror. And I also did, once upon a time, I did historical romances, which are, thanks to the digital age, still out there. And, oh, and what, I'm sorry, the rest of the question was, I don't know. I have a really good friend who every time somebody asks, oh, when do you see this, vampire trend dying? And he'll always say, don't ask me because I predicted the demise 10 years ago. So you never know. They come up, they go away a little bit, they come back. But I mean, we've honestly, it's been part of vampire lore, ghost lore. It's been part of our storytelling experience from day one. So it's going to twist and go around and perhaps die down a little bit and then come back again, with new twists on it. So, because I mean, one of the great things about a vampire, my dear friends in New Orleans who are spiritual vampires, but I mean, the vampire as in the Bram Stoker concept of a vampire, I certainly have not been able to sit down with one to find out exactly what's true and what's not. So every author certainly has the right to, put their spin on what a vampire does. So who knows? Who knows what we'll see in the future? I mean, they've sparkled. They can do almost everything. So we'll see. To,
You have very intelligent fans. The questions are very well written and interesting. What were the challenges?
I think that
research,
for me,
literary, psychological, and logistical in bringing Crimson Twilight
to life. You are right with the details of how something can happen. One of the things I've done recently is gone shooting with friends in Vegas at a shooting range to learn really how various guns work, because my people are FBI agents, so they are carrying guns, and they're FBI agents, so one's hoping and assuming they know how to use them. But I mean, the details I had, until I had gone out with them, like the actual concept of using different pistols, the difference between something that's a revolver and something that has a cartridge, like all kinds of like things that are probably quite obvious to many people, or things that I needed to look up. And then I think one of the other interesting things I found, not just with Crimson Twilight, but some cities or counties or states, different areas within, have one central morgue. The morgue may be actually in a doctor's office. I mean, there's so many different ways that when you're working a murder, you have to find out what your area actually has. So I think just making sure that that you are right on the kind of details that will make somebody immediately stop and think, I can't read this because that just couldn't have happened that way. That's, I think, the hardest thing. You are right on. Can't read this that way.
Mm-hmm. Another question comes from Chris.
Oh, I have none.
How do you, and this is very interesting for any writer.
I shouldn't say, I mean, every once in a
while.
How
do you work with an editor without the pride thing getting in the way?
I do think I'm right on something, but I've never worked with an editor who is not willing to talk to you. The other thing I think when you're working with an editor is a lot of it is, kind of know when to hold, know when to fold. When something is really important to you, if you really, get it discussed with your editor, most of the time you're going to keep it. And then also, you have to look at your own work sometimes and think, I thought that paragraph was the most interesting thing in the world, but she's probably right, that it is slowing down the plot, so you have to figure out something else to do with it. I do think that that's one of the dangers we face today. We all need to be edited. I think everyone out there writing needs to be edited. And editing is important. It's part of the growth of a story. And there are definitely very good editors and editors who probably should not be editing. So you're going to hope you're working with a really good editor, especially with so many people self-publishing today. You have to remember that there is a line editor who makes sure that everything is, that the story is making sense and that it's rolling along and that you're not bogging it down, or that, the things that are really compact, making it a good story. And then you also need the copy editor or somebody perhaps who's working as both to make sure that somebody doesn't stand up 3 times in a single paragraph, or in one situation. The same type thing, that they did not start off with blue eyes and come up with brown eyes, or the copy editor makes sure spelling is correct and all this type of thing. So I have upon occasion told a copy editor, no, I'm positive I'm right, because, and I will show them where I got my information from. And many a time I've said, thank you so much, you saved my butt, because I was absolutely wrong on that. Excuse me.
Stephanie asks, how are you the same?
Sadly, I'm older than most of them.
From your main characters. How are you the same, I guess, yet different from your main characters?
I think something that does come through is most of the time, my main characters are going to have a lot of my point of view on the world. And there, I try to remember that fairly frequently, but there, just certain things that I feel or think. Just my main character is never going to hurt an animal. My main character, there's certain things the main character is not going to do, just because I wouldn't like them, if they were to behave in that manner. So I think something within us comes through, if it's a character we see as heroic in any sense. And not that we're heroic, but because it's got to be somebody you're going to like. I mean, unless of course you're writing Hannibal Lecter, but I mean, in this case, I wasn't. So.
Mm-hmm. Diane would like to know, when you hear from your readers, whether it's email, Facebook, nice. Twitter,
they will ask me to continue.
What do they say to you?
Or a lot of the questions are you going to do any more in such and such a series? Sometimes I'll point out if I did make a mistake. So that's true too, and I don't mind at all. I'm glad to hear because sometimes, especially as in the digital age, we can go back in. Certainly, I can't fix a print book once it's on the market, but digital, if you have something glaring, you can go back in and fix. So it's great to hear, even if you made a mistake.
Mm-hmm. So Elizabeth wants to know.
No.
Do you ever find yourself embarrassed or struggling to write the racy parts of your novels?
I've done this for a very long time. And when I first started, my mom had been a copy editor for an advertising agency. And so from the beginning, I had my mother checking my work because it meant more to me to be published than to be upset that my mother was looking at what I was doing. So my biggest concern today when I'm working on a love scene is to make it individual to the people in the love scene, so that it's different and fresh every time. That's my biggest concern. And then I think it's one thing that I thought was fun is years ago, I had been working a lot and I turned around and saw that my husband was sitting behind me, and it was kind of like, what? And he just looked at me and said, you can't write on memory forever. So Years ago. After that, I thought, okay, but I think that it's the same thing with, they have, I have 5 children, and, through the years met many of their friends, and I've seen so many very beautiful young people, and you wonder, why does this beautiful young person wind up with that beautiful young person? And it's that special spark between them. And I think that's what I try to convey in my people, and definitely in a love scene. Like what makes, it's just these two people are individuals, and it's got to be very different, and it's different within them, so that the scariest part is being repetitious. So I always try to think of it as the people, the characters. Was this going to be funny? Are they the type who would like start off passionately but then trip over the step? I mean, there's so many different ways that people get together, and that's what I try to concentrate on. Far more than details. We all know the details. There's so many ways. Well, I live in Miami. One of my favorite things I do is scuba dive.
When you're not
There's
writing,
nothing in the world like
what
diving.
are some things that you like to do?
Still the one place I go without a cell phone. It's you're off in your own little world. I have taken ballroom dance, and I really love it. What else do I go to karaoke, and I have a lot of pets, and I have a lot of children, so I'm often with children or animals. Well, I mean, my children are grown up, but and so far, my nephew was the first to procreate, but he's got 3 of the cutest little boys I've ever seen, and I love every chance to be with them. Grown up, our first, he's got 3. I love
Speaking of ballroom dancing, Diane, who says that she's fascinated by it as well, wants to know if you've ever danced competitively.
At that time, we used to do the actually, he was doing pro and I was doing amateur, but it's the same circuit kind of that you, well, not always, but a lot of the time. Uh-oh, I just went off too. Oh, there I am and back. I did, and I truly enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And I thought about, wow, I should do this again, because then you don't have to, if you're going to enough dance classes where you get an exercise. And it was a lot of fun. And wow, I should go to the dance classes where exercise.
Lulu has a good question for you. You've written many novels.
I do enjoy the series.
Do you find it easier to write in a series?
You get to know certain of the characters.
Or standalone books?
And a lot of things are given. Sometimes they're not. I mean, the Krewe of Hunters move on 2 different places, and there are usually 2 new people involved in the main plot, which was one of the things I just loved about working on Crimson Twilight, was getting to bring Sloan and Jane back and actually letting them get married to each other. That was a lot of fun. Well, they never did get married actually during the book, but well, never mind. I can't say that. But that was fun. But I do like a series because there are certain things that are established. It's kind of like if you're doing it, you feel like you're having dinner at a friend's house. You have certain things that are already set up. But it depends too, because every once in a while I've had an idea that belongs in a one-shot deal. So when that's happening, I like to go in that direction too. I don't think one is harder than the other. I think a lot of it depends on your passion for the project, for what's going on. I don't think it is harder. A lot of it depends on passion project. Oh,
Maggie would like to know what the biggest mistake
that's
new writers make.
Kind of hard. I mean, I think one of
the new writers make
things that you have to be careful of when you just start out is avoiding cliches. And then there's something that we call the information dump. And we still do it. I mean, people who've been working for years and years still have a tendency to do it, and you have to pull yourself back. but you start feeling that everybody must know everything on the first page. And so you give out more information. Say you're opening with a bit of action. In the middle of the action, you'll decide that you need to describe, oh, well, why he's there. So you've got a whole thing on his spool and his back near the past. And so I think definitely being very careful of threading the information a reader knows throughout a manuscript instead of trying to get it all in on the first page. And so I think definitely very threading the information a reader knows without trying to get it all in the first page.
We have time for just a few more questions, and I'd like to
I had a couple of good friends read it.
Did friends and family read Crimson Twilight? And if so, what did they think of it?
Before it goes in? And luckily, the friends who read it liked it very much. Now, remember, they are friends. So, but my one friend is also my assistant, and she would tell me if she didn't like it. So I was just super happy that they did enjoy it, and it was just fun. So I was very, very happy. And like I said, I always have, even before it goes to an editor, because if I have someone read and when I say someone read it, actually, I have two friends that I work with, and they're both, oh my God, they read constantly. So I'm not asking someone to take a look at it who isn't really familiar with fiction. But I always have somebody read it just in case. And you can do very weird things that I often hope to fix before they go into an editor. I know that I had started one scene, or I'd finished working for the night, and they had gone to bed. And the next chapter started with them still talking at dinner, and they'd already gone to bed. So, well, I mean, obviously, this is something that the editors catch too, but I like to be able to catch that kind of thing before it goes in. And the problem is, of course, being your own editor, is you see what's in your mind sometimes, not what's on the page. So that's why I think it's so important that you do have editors. Editor is what's not what's on the page. I think that you have editors.
Well, that's very interesting that you said that. The last question for this evening is from Madison.
That's not
and
a fair
she says,
question.
if only one of your books could make it into a TV show or film, which one would it be and why?
The Krewe is optioned right now, so we'll see what happens with that, whether it actually gets out there or not. And I believe they would be using the main characters from the first book, which was Phantom Evil. But there's one I would love to see. It's not actually one book, it was a trilogy. Years and years ago, I wrote books called One More Blue, One More Gray, and One Road West. And they were really the Civil War from both sides. And they've never been out of print. And I think they were written in the mid-80s, I believe, and we were doing the Civil War trail going up from Florida to Massachusetts, where we had a lot of family, every year, and I just went to reenactment after reenactment, and I felt very passionate about it, and I'm still grateful about those books. And actually, I have a funny story that goes with them, because my kids came running out to tell me, like, oh, your books are in the Abe Lincoln Museum. They're in the Abe Lincoln Museum. And so I ran in and I picked up one of the books, and I'm like, oh my God, it is. It's in the Abe Lincoln Museum. And the sales lady came up to me and she said, can I help you? And I said, oh my God, this is my book. And she looked at me and said, no, honey, not until you pay for it. As soon as you pay for it, it's your book. So I'm like, okay. But I would, because a lot of times they don't want to, they're careful about picking up historicals. But I'm starting to see more. So that's I would like to see that. Or for our dancers dead on the dance floor. I would like that.
Well, Heather, I can't believe that.
Dead on the dance floor.
Yeah. I'm sad that the evening is ending, but it's been such a pleasure to have you with us. And we wish you great success on the new book coming out March 25th. And those that have joined us, thank you very much. And don't forget to go back to BookTrib to enter to win that mystery bag of Heather's favorite things, and to sign up for more exciting chats.
Thank you so much to
such as
everyone who
this
asked
one.
questions,
Thanks
and thank you
to everyone
who
for a great
has
evening, and
read the
especially
books,
to
and just
our very
thank you guys
exciting,
so much.
talented guest, Heather Graham. Thank you, Heather.